أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه. We have been studying 23rd word, second chapter, and this was about the verse. 23rd word was about, indeed we have created man in the most excellent of patterns, then sent him down to the lowest of the low, except those who believe and do good deeds. So we went through the first and the second remarks. Last week we were going through the third remark.
In regard to his acts and deeds and his labor, man is a weak animal, an impotent creature. The extent of his power of disposal and ownership in this respect is so narrow that it is no greater than as far as his hand can reach. Domestic animals, even the reins of which have been given to man, have each taken a share of his weakness, impotence, and laziness, so that if they are compared with their wild counterparts, a great difference is apparent, like domestic goats and cattle, and wild goats and cattle. But in regard to passivity, acceptance, supplication, and entreaty, man is an honored traveler in this hostel of the world. He is the guest of one so generous that infinite treasuries of mercy have been opened to him, and innumerable unique beings and servants subjugated to him. And a sphere so large has been prepared for this guest's recreation, amusement, and benefit that half its diameter is as long and broad as the imagination can stretch. Thus, if man relies on his ego and making worldly life his goal, attempts to taste temporary pleasures while struggling to make his living, he becomes submerged within an extremely constricted sphere, then departs. All the members, systems, and faculties given him will testify against him at the resurrection and will bring a suit against him. Whereas, if he knows himself to be a guest and spends the capital of his life within the sphere of permission of the generous one of whom he is the guest, he will strive for a long, eternal life within a broad sphere, then take his rest and ease, and later he may rise to the highest of the high. Moreover, all the members and systems given to man will be happy with him and testify in favor of him in the hereafter. For sure, all the wonderful faculties given to men were not for this insignificant worldly life, but for an everlasting life of great significance. For if we compare man with the animals, we see that man is very rich in regard to faculties and members, 100 times more so than the animals. But in the pleasures of worldly life and in animal life, he falls 100 times lower. For in each pleasure he receives is a trace of thousands of pains. The pains of the past and fears of the future, and the pain at each pleasure's passing, spoil the enjoyment to be had from them, and leave a trace in the pleasure. But animals are not like that. They receive pleasure with no pains. They take enjoyment with no sorrow. Neither the sorrows of the past cause them suffering, nor the fears of the future distress them. They live peacefully and offer thanks to their Creator. This means that if man, who is created on the most excellent of patterns, restricts his thought to the life of this world, he falls 100 times lower than a creature like a sparrow. Although he is higher than the animals, I explained this fact in another place by means of a comparison. It is related to this, so I shall repeat it here. It was like this. A man gave one of his servants 10 pieces of gold and told him to have a suit of clothes made in a particular cloth. Then to a second one, he gave 1,000 pieces of gold, and putting in the servant's pocket a note on which certain things were written, sent him to a market. The first servant bought an excellent suit of the finest cloth with the 10 pieces of gold, while the second servant did not use his head, and looking at the first servant and not reading the account note in his pocket, he gave 1,000 pieces of gold to a shopkeeper and asked for a suit of clothes. The dishonest shopkeeper gave him a suit of the very worst quality cloth. Then the wretched servant returned to his lord and received a severe reprimand and a terrible punishment. Thus, even the most unintelligent will understand that the 1,000 pieces of gold given the second servant were not to buy a suit of clothes, but for some important trade. In just the same way, each of the immaterial members and subtle faculties in man have expanded to a degree 100 times greater than that of the animals. In just the same way, each of the immaterial members and subtle faculties in man have expanded to a degree 100 times greater than that of the animals. For example, consider faculties and members like man's eyes, which can discern all the degrees of beauty, and his sense of taste, which can distinguish all the varieties of the particular tastes of foods, and his mind, which can penetrate to all the subtlest points of reality, and his heart, which yearns for every sort of perfection. And then consider extremely simple members of the animals, which have developed only 1 or 2 degrees. There is just this difference, that in animals, a member particular to some function and special to a particular species develops more. But this development is particular. The reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties is this. By reason of the mind and thought, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and expanded. The reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties is this. By reason of the mind and thought, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and expanded. And numerous emotions have come into being because of the multiplicity of his needs. And his senses have become extremely diverse. And because of the comprehensiveness of his nature, desires have appeared turned towards numerous aims. And because he has numerous duties due to his nature, his members and faculties have expanded greatly. And since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship, he has been given abilities which embrace the seeds of all perfections. Thus, this great wealth in faculties and abundant capital was certainly not given for procuring this temporary worldly life. Rather, man's fundamental duty is to perform his duties, which look to innumerable aims, and proclaim his impotence, poverty, and faults in the form of worship, and observing the glorifications of beings with a universal eye, to bear witness to them, and seeing the instances of the assistance of the most merciful one, to offer thanks, and gazing on the miracles of dominical power in beings, to contemplate on them as objects from which lessons may be drawn.
Thus, this great wealth and faculties and abundant capital was certainly not given for procuring this temporary worldly life. Rather, man's fundamental duty is to perform his duties, which look to innumerable aims and proclaim his impotence, poverty, and faults in the form of worship. And observing the glorifications of being with a universal eye, to bear witness to them, and seeing the instances of the assistance of the most merciful one, to offer thanks, and gazing the miracles of dominical power in beings, to contemplate on them as objects from which lessons may be drawn. O man who worships this world, is a lover of worldly life, and is heedless in the meaning of the most excellent of patterns. The old side saw the reality of worldly life in a vision. It transformed him into the new side. You too listened to it in the form of a comparison. I saw that I was a traveler and was going on a long journey, that is to say, I was being sent. The one who was my Lord gradually gave me some of the money from the 60 gold pieces he had allotted me. I spent them and came to a hostel where there were amusements of all kinds. In one night in the hostel, I spent 10 pieces of gold on gambling, amusements, and the enjoyment of fame. In the morning, I had left no money. Moreover, I had done no trade nor bought any goods for the place I was going. All that remained to me were the money were sins and pains, and from the amusements, wounds and sorrow. While in the sorry state, a man suddenly appeared. He said to me, "You have wasted all your capital and deserve punishment. You are going to your destination bankrupt and with your hands empty. But if you have any sense, the door of repentance is open. When you receive the 15 pieces of gold that remain to you, keep half of them in reserve. That is, obtain the things necessary for you in the place where you are going." I looked. My soul did not agree to this. So he said, "A third then." My soul still did not obey him. Then he said, "A quarter." My soul could not give up the habits to which it was addicted, so the man angrily turned his back on me and left. Suddenly, the scene changed. I was in a train in a tunnel, which was traveling fast as though downwards vertically. I took fright, but what could I do? There was no escape anywhere. Strangely, attractive flowers and enticing fruits appeared on both sides of the train, and I, like the foolish and inexperienced, looked at them and, stretching out my hand, tried to pick them. But they were covered in thorns and tore at my hands when I touched them, making them bleed. With the movement of the train, my hands were lacerated at being parted from them. They cost me much. Suddenly, a porter on the train said, "Give me 5 kurush, and I shall give you as much of the flowers and fruits as you want. You are caused the loss of 100 kurush with your hands being torn, rather than 5 kurush. Also, there's a penalty. You cannot pick them without permission." In distress, I put my head out of the window and looked ahead to see when the tunnel would end. I saw that in a place of the tunnel's entrance were numerous holes. People were being thrown into them from the long train. I saw a hole opposite me. On either side, there was a gravestone. I looked in amazement. I saw that written on one of the gravestones was the name Said. In my bewilderment and anxiety, I exclaimed, "Alas!" Then suddenly I heard the voice of the man who had given me advice at the door of the hostel. He asked, "Have you come to your senses?" I replied, "Yes, but it is too late now." He said, "Repent and place your trust in God." I replied that I would. Then I awoke and saw myself as the new side. The old side had disappeared. So that was a vision. May God cause good to come of it. I shall interpret one or two parts of it, and then you can interpret the rest for yourself. The journey was the journey which passes from the world of spirits through the mother's womb, youth, old age, the grave, the intermediate realm, the resurrection, and the bridge of Sirat toward eternity. The 60 pieces of gold were the 60 years of life. I reckoned I saw the vision when I was 45 years old, and I had nothing to guarantee it, but a sincere student of the all-wise Quran advised me to spend half of the 15 that remained to me on the hereafter. The hostel for me was Istanbul. The train was time, and each year a carriage. As for the tunnel, it was the life of this world. The thorny flowers and fruits were implicit pleasures and forbidden amusements, which cause pain while indulging in them, on thinking of their passing, and on separation lacerate the heart, making it bleed. They also cause a punishment to be inflicted. The porter on the train told me to give him 5 kurush so that he could give me as many as I wanted. The meaning of this is as follows. The pleasure and enjoyment man receives through licit striving within the sphere of what is lawful are sufficient to him. No need remains to enter the unlawful. You may interpret the rest for yourself.
So I would like to just go through the first 2 paragraphs from last week, and we can start the discussion from there, inshallah. Because last week we discussed the first 2 paragraphs. So very quickly I will go over it. So he was comparing man and the animal. So he's saying that in regard to his acts and deeds and his neighbor, man is a weak animal, an impotent creature, and when he was comparing men to, or as an evidence for that, he's saying that even the domestic animals, compared to their wild counterparts, are weak. Because as if they get this aspect of men within themselves. But then he was talking about, in regard to passivity and acceptance, supplication and entreaty, man is an honored traveler in this hostel of the world. So last week when we were talking about that, as far as I remember, we mentioned the word guest in here. Because in the first case, we are pretending as if we are the owner of the land. So it comes with a lot of responsibility. But if I consider myself as a guest, in the expense of obeying the landlord's commands, but I am getting rid of the burden of controlling my needs or trying to take care of my needs, because as long as I am a guest, then things are being taken care of me. So this was the dilemma that we were mentioning last week. And Ayşenur asked the question, I guess, to give a practical example of what it means to be a guest, or not to be a guest versus being a guest. And I guess we gave the example of if we were to be a hotel room, for example, we were not furnishing the hotel, because we know that tomorrow morning we are going to leave this place. We just, within the boundaries of our contract with the owner of the hotel, so we are not breaking up the things, but we are just making use of them in a good manner. In our life, are we acting like that? I guess this was the question mark that we put there.
Last week, I think there was two things. Like one, like not taking this life as like somewhere permanent, but like you are destined for some other life, that you should take it as such. And Abdurrahman's point was really good, that like if you consider yourself as a guest, then respecting the host's principles in the house, you wouldn't have to worry about anything else other than just like observing those rules, and everything else will be prepared and given to you. But like if you act like opposite way, then you are exploiting the goodwill of the host. Then like you are taking the burden on yourself, like not just like trying to like provide yourself, but also like being expelled from the palace, if you like.
Those are nice examples, and I understand that, but kind of it's to me kind of like abstract. But when it comes to like real life, how you guys apply those examples to the real life? Because an example, it's easy. Yes, you're at the hotel. You don't have to worry about anything else. You don't try to renovate the hotel. You just enjoy your time. It's still understandable, but when it comes to the real life, like daily life, it's kind of like difficult to practice or apply those examples. Or it's just me?
I think it's just you.
Okay, then continue.
I mean, it may be difficult, but like it's not different though. Like even though this is an analogy, it's just an example. Like that, like what is the truth in the analogy? When it comes to like the practical life, it is like one should have the same like mindset. That's the whole point that like I think the author is trying to make. You should have the same mindset about your life here. That you're a guest. That like this is not a like permanent like abode for you, that you will be going somewhere else. And he's just like inviting like the reader to observe the rules or the principles of the guest house and rely on him and live in peace. Like in one, like, and it's actually like it's very simple, because it's about like changing your like understanding, your perception of life. On the other hand, like it's a struggle, because like it means a constant reminder, because we are forgetful and heedless.
And I guess practically what we do is we always strive for more and more in the world. Let's say we never question until college if school is something that we should go for. It's by default we go to primary school, secondary school, high school, whatever. When we get to college, after the college, we say, okay, I should take this education, that education. And in the job, still I am targeting for more and more. And most of the time, without questioning, it is becoming purpose of my life. But and even when I go to work, let's say I start as a engineer in entry-level worker, then the next goal is right out there appearing to me. I need to become a manager, then the CEO, or start my own business, whatever. It doesn't have any end. And the feeling of satisfaction is always the same. And when I finish primary school, even when I become a CEO, most likely I am going to become as satisfied as the time I finished primary school. Because once I finished primary school, the secondary school was there. So the satisfaction was never there. So in my practical life, this is how it goes. I am in a never-ending loop. As long as I want the satisfaction within those, getting those stuff. And taking back to hotel analogy, all of those stuff that I am thinking as the cornerstones of my life, as if I am furnishing my life with them. But yeah, I placed, let's say, high school, college, whatever degrees and positions in my life, all over the place in my life. Personally speaking, yes, I am going through the same procedure as well, but I'm not really enjoying them because I don't have time for enjoying them. This makes me really question, I guess, why am I doing all of this? And this is what the author in here is also challenging me to ask. Because as I try to furnish my life as such, knowing that I'm almost starting to get the down steep of life. Okay, I climbed, now I'm at middle age and
Turning down.
It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, it's downhill from here. So what was the point? So I don't know how to live in an alternative life, but living in this life as if I am furnishing my life. I didn't enjoy this aspect of my life at all so far, which at least makes me question for what's the alternative. And there must be an alternative, otherwise, I mean, even if you always become the successful in the classroom, still it comes with a pay. It's so much draining because always there are much more goals in front of you than you can attain, which always puts a lot of pressure on you. Then what's the point? My desires are always more than what I have and more than what I can have. I guess this is what he's saying in terms of saying that in regard to his acts and deeds and labor, man is a weak animal.
I think sometimes like when, at least I think like that's in my case, when we read this kind of analogies, probably like I try to take the analogy and apply it, like copy it and apply it to the life like as is. Like as if like there is like when you have this understanding, you will have a completely different life than what you are going through right now. But there's always that kind of expectations, I think, because at the end, like if it's not going to be different in a way, like the way that you live your life, then what's the point of going through all these anyway? That's the, I guess the next natural question. But I don't think that's really the case. Like whatever, like you are gonna wake up in the morning again, you are gonna have to have your breakfast, and you will have to go to something for to provide for your own livelihood. But like in terms of the actions that you are gonna go through in life is not gonna change. But how you deal with each individual case, like what kind of mindset that you're gonna deal with them is gonna make the impact and the difference. So in other words, like we are not changing the physical actions that you are going through, because you cannot get out of his creation, and there is there are laws in this creation that you have to obey. for example, like you have no luxury of like not getting hungry. But when you go through those experiences, like your worldview can be different. How you perceive them to be. I think that's why he listed in the paragraph that we read for the second times. I think that's where he's listing like what kind of worldview one should have, like is it like result of like going through this education.
And I think as long as I seek satisfaction in this first aspect of man, in terms of my acts, deeds, and labor, I am doomed. I guess this is the main aspect that it's attracting my attention to. And the question is, personally, where do I seek perfection? Or where do I see satisfaction? And generally, those are being sought in either eating a better food or driving a better car, becoming a better position in the job. These sort of things are, I guess, generally being where I seek perfection, trying to do best of something. There's the second part of the paragraph that we didn't discuss too much last time, but he's going to open it up. In regard to passivity, acceptance, supplication, and entreaty, man is an honored traveler in this hostel of the world. In regard to passivity, acceptance, supplication, and entreaty. So this is where human is better. So I guess if there's going to be a change in perspective, this is where it should be. But I don't know. What do you think about what does it mean to be passive, acceptance, supplication, and treaty, and man becoming a guest in respect of these aspects? Any comments from online participants as well?
I have a slight idea, I guess, since no one's speaking. As like Brother Osman was saying before, like I remember once he said this, he's saying ego is very, very central in everything we're reading here. The fact that you need to understand your impotence. And here, passivity, acceptance, supplication, and entreaty, you know, these are all things where you can't have an ego and have these qualities. Because if you're passive, if you accept things, if you supplicate to other people, you can't have an ego. You need to get rid of your ego. And when you get rid of your ego, what happens is man is created so that he can be a mirror, or like you can be a mirror, like because you are a creation. And you can be a mirror of God's names. And when you become a mirror of God's names, when you get rid of your ego, then everything you do, everything you see, you know, it's all done in God's names. And there's like and as it says in like the next sentences, is the whole world, the whole universe is created for your pleasure and your amusement there. If you can just get rid of your own ego and see that manifestation of God's names in you and be a mirror in that sense, then you can find joy in everything. That's how I understand.
Don't get into getting rid of ego.
He knew where I was going to go.
Because it's going to take another half hour. Go ahead.
Yeah, it may be just a verbiage. We have discussed this with Yusuf a lot, but like employing the ego instead of getting rid of it, understanding the purpose and the truth, the reality of it, and employing ego for that purpose. That's what I understand from getting rid of it.
So not relying on ego, let's put it this way. Or maybe a better wording might be egotism. So saying that now I do it, I have it sort of. Other than that,
Yeah, like in simple terms, like understanding that ego nothing but a mirror, and you need that mirror to understand the qualities of the creator. If you don't have the mirror, there is nothing for those qualities to reflect on. So, like, if you break the mirrors, there is no God for you anymore. That's why, like, getting rid of is not the purpose. It is rather like understanding the function of that mirror, so you can actually hold that mirror against the like manifestation of God's names. See, it wasn't half an hour.
good. You're improving. So,
Can you make it happen? I would like to hear more on that. I mean, how are you gonna make that a mirror, your ego?
Now, what's the question?
can you repeat the question, Asim?
I said I want Osman to speak for half an hour on that. That would be very helpful. So I'm just asking if you can elaborate further on how the ego can be a mirror.
I think ego is already a mirror. It is us like misusing that quality that we have. So it's really like just the understanding of the function and the purpose of the ego and using for that purpose. That's all it is. Like it's nothing more than that. I mean, like the primary function of ego to be the mirror to reflect the attributes or the manifestations of the creator. For example, like there isn't like compassion that you feel or love that you feel. If you ascribe it to yourself, like you're an egotistical person, you assume that like quality for yourself. But if you understand that like you are not the source of it, you are just a mere like mirror that is just reflecting through you, then you are acknowledging the source of that like compassion. And understanding that is like, for me, it's the right way of using the ego.
I want to say something. If no one else has, I apologize if this was already repeated, but I was just looking at the paragraph, and I feel like the word relies is really key here for me. If man relies on his ego, for me, I understand that to mean that if I rely on something, I see it as the source that will bring about a sense of satisfaction, a sense of contentment to me. And so if I perceive my ego as the driving force that will help me attain whatever whatever thing that I am seeking, then both in the process and at the end, whatever you want to call the end, but in the very process itself, I will only find constant obstacles and constant discontent. For it will never serve to be a vehicle that will bring me to that satisfaction of which I seek. And so I guess again, I'm just thinking out loud here, brainstorming, if you will. But I feel like the notion of relying on it, not again as the other brothers have emphasized, not doing away with it, because for me, I don't think that's possible. I just can't throw my ego away. It's an essential part of me. I feel that it's an impossible task to disown it, but and using it as a mirror, well, that's something that I think I need to further work on. But just at this stage, for me to recognize that it cannot provide me and it cannot drive me towards all that I seek, both academically, career-wise, whatever, but also in terms of my human needs as well. So yeah, then I'll find myself, as Nursey says here, in an extremely constricted sphere, because all it really points me towards is dead ends. So again, nothing really remarkably new than what was talked about, but I just thought the word relies, for me, deserved some emphasis, if you will.
Jazakallah khair. Yes, it was a good point. So, and also I am also seeing it here that man is not meant to focus on enjoying the moment, because this is what he's comparing it here. Like he was going to give the example of a sparrow, I guess, in the following paragraph. So, because apparently there are creatures which are enjoying the moment or meant to enjoy the moment. Apparently they are happy with whatever they are given. But man is not. So then how am I going to utilize whatever is given to me? This is a serious question.
Is not or cannot.
Cannot, yeah. Man cannot.
Even if you try to, like, you cannot, because, like, unless, like, where did he talk about the worries from the past, like, and regrets from the past, worries from the future? The pains of the past and the fears of the future, and the pain at each pleasure passing spoiled enjoyment and enjoyment to head from them and leave a trace in the pleasure. So, since we have the intellect that connects us, I'm not sure if it's just the intellect, but like I think it's the primary one that connects us with the past and the future as well. And if probably like if everyone like question himself, you would find yourself in the same situation. I personally like find myself like that. I'm always worried about the next moment, like not even thinking that actually as I am worried about the next moment, and like the moment that I am in is passing by, like with that like anxiety. But that never stops. That's almost like a very like innate integral part of yourself. So if you are created as such, can you truly really like enjoy the moment? If you see yourself as the sustainer of your own life. I mean, like, practically speaking, like, we do, again, like, speaking from my own experience, I do stuff that is like numbing, like some sort of painkiller. I do those kind of stuff just to get by the moment. So I can busy myself so that I don't think about this. So it's just like occupying your mind so you will not reflect on this like very like reality of yours. I think that's why like entertainment is one of the biggest industry, because it's preoccupying human minds. So you will never be left alone with yourself.
Yes, for us.
Yeah. So I am thinking of this word. He says, if a man relies on his ego, so what does that mean? It seems he's saying on ego is related to making worldly life his goal. And how do I make worldly life my goal? What does it mean? That worldly life is my goal. So maybe then he says, well, a person with a worldly life as a goal is someone who attempts to taste temporary pleasures. That's an interesting way of putting it. Someone attempts to taste temporary pleasures. What is a temporary pleasure? I think that is pleasure as a human being for me acceptable or desirable? If it is temporary, can I actually taste pleasure when it is temporary? And to cut my ramblings short, I would just say that maybe these things, when we hear someone say, don't look for temporary pleasure, maybe in my mind, what comes up is the two options are tasting temporary pleasure or not having any pleasure. Maybe the option in my mind comes up as, oh, this is the only kind of pleasure, quote unquote, I know, and I should not have it. No, I should not taste it. And this is something that I need to think about. I feel that, do I taste temporary pleasure or do I attempt to taste temporary pleasure? But in fact, is it at all possible to taste something temporary, and is it really pleasurable? It seems this paragraph is saying that what he means by not relying on the ego or to have a worldly life is to really ask myself and look at myself and say, what kind of faculties do I have? What are their needs? What do they seek after? What do they ask for? Really ask them, what do you say? And if you want pleasure, then that's how you have been made. And what could give you pleasure? So I think he's saying that this notion of a temporary pleasure is actually something for me to say, is it something possible to taste, or is it something that I only attempt and never succeed? And the solution is, the other option is not to not have pleasure, but to have it in a way that provides an eternal dimension to those pleasures. A pleasure so that they would become real pleasures, not pleasures that are temporary. So I think the phrase temporary pleasure is an interesting one, and I have to really, I think, question the possibility of such a pleasure. Is it real pleasure? Do I really experience it? Can I get it? Can I get temporary pleasure? Or that I lie, that pleasure can actually, of the kind that I really want as a human being, as I find myself, if I don't make any excuses for it, I say, no, I really want pleasure, really a lot. And, what kind of pleasure, what kind of time frame do I want it for? So to be worldly in that sense is to deform my faculties, is to ruin my faculties, is to something like this, that it's not simply, some kind of a mistake that I'm making, that, it is something that I'm doing that in myself as if Nursi is saying, I should find, and I would find a rejection and an opposition to such an idea of pleasure. I think that, yeah, so I'm thinking about this idea of temporary pleasure that I attempt to taste. And what is the other option is real pleasure, not the option of no pleasure or something like that. So
I think in the example when he talks about this train, and from the window of the train he is trying to grab those fruits. So the fruits out there are really tempting, and I somehow have a feeling that if I get those fruits, I'm going to enjoy them. But once I touch them, it is, since they are thorny, they are bleeding my hand. And as the train moves, it is even
Separation.
Yeah, with the separation from the those thorny fruits, it is even bleeding my hands more. So still, I have some sort of an access to the fruit, and somehow I get the impression that it's going to be joyful. But I guess it's very costly for me. The input that I get from this joy versus the pain that I get from it. Nurse uses another example for that. Say, he says, poisonous honey. So honey is something sweet, we like it. And let's say I ate this poisonous honey, and for a few moments in my mouth, I get this taste of honey. But then the taste of honey is gone, but I am left with the effects of poison, which is a pain in my stomach, which lasts with me, maybe kills me.
Permanent effects.
Yeah, much more permanent leftover from the honey. So, I mean, apparently there is some sort of a joy, but, and practically speaking in my life, and if I don't know any other sort of a joy, I would call this as the only joy. And I wouldn't deny that, for example, as a child, eating a lot of chocolate, is it not fun? Certainly it is fun, a child would say. But once the teeth are rotten, in the extreme example, it's very painful. Maybe then the child would say, well, if only I haven't eaten so much chocolate. But the child wouldn't deny that it was fun at some point. So I guess in my life, in practical things, I do enjoy some of the stuff, but once it passes over, then starts the painful part of it. And if you ask me, would you still, if you were given a second option, would you do it again? At least I should consider it, because of the end results, it's very painful now. And if I take it as a whole package, not just the joy at the moment of it, but this consequence of joy is also part of the package. And if you ask me, would you like to buy the whole package? I would say no, just the joy part of it, if possible, because the consequence part doesn't taste well. But yeah, as far as I was saying, if there's no other option for me, if I don't know any better form of a joy, if this is the only thing in my life as joy, then my options are either to have this very defect joy with this additional pain afterwards, or not have it at all if possible. So if there is no comments, then I will slowly read the third paragraph. We discussed some of it, but if anybody has any comment on that, we can go from there. Moreover, all the members and systems given to men will be happy with him and testify in favor of him in the hereafter. For sure, all the wonderful faculties given to men were not for this insignificant worldly life, but for an everlasting life of great significance. For if we were to compare men with the animals, we see that man is very rich in regard to faculties and members, 100 times more so than the animals. But in the pleasures of worldly life and in animal life, he falls 100 times lower. For in each pleasure he receives is the trace of thousands of pains. The pains of the past and fears of the future and the pain at each pleasure's passing spoil the enjoyment to be had from them, and leave a trace in the pleasure. But animals are not like that. They receive pleasure with no pains. They take enjoyment with no sorrow. Neither the sorrows of the past cause them suffering, nor the fears of the future distress them. They live peacefully and offer thanks to their Creator. And also the next paragraph very briefly. This means that if man, who is created on the most excellent of patterns, restricts his thought to the life of this world,
His thought to the life.
Yeah, if the man restricts his thought to the life of this world, he falls 100 times lower than a creature like a sparrow, although he is higher than the animals. And then he gives an example for that.
So he restricts his thoughts. I just wanted to underline that thoughts part.
Isn't it kind of funny that here he says animals are not like that. They receive pleasure with no pains. They take enjoyment with no sorrow. And the sorrow of the past causes them no suffering. The future doesn't. But then if you were a true believer and you lived,
You will be.
you would be in that state. You would have no suffering. You live in no pain. You wouldn't care about the future or the past. So we're trying to actually become like animals. I don't know. That's what I get.
Actually, you become more angelic, I think. But it wasn't fun.
You are 100%.
So, something. I think it is interesting to think about human beings' neediness and poverty, and being a traveler and a guest, being provided by someone else. It is interesting to think, what do we include in this? And is there things that we still keep out of this poverty and this need? And I think it is humbling. It is not much. I haven't thought much about it, but just recently occurred to me that the capacity to reason and think and to make sense of things. This, that we think this is what we are doing, the free will, which is actually just a choice, and things just come. That to think that all the things that obtain in my mind, in my thoughts, things that they are also not in my control, that the reasons that I think satisfactory, the proofs and evidences that I find to be evidences are not in my power, and that it is entirely possible that something that I took to be a strong evidence then ceases to be an evidence, and I find myself not convinced about something that I thought I was convinced about. And so to really recognize that even at that level of our thinking and thoughts, it is not in our power to endow ourselves with this sort of realization so that I could say, oh, now I completely see that I am working for eternity. I completely I have hold of, or I have gotten hold of an understanding that I can now ensure that I will be in this state. We call it angelic, or however. And it's interesting to think about the reality of human being as a guest, and always in need of someone providing, includes the various degrees of assurances that we find ourselves with being sure about something to some degree, being satisfied with something to some degree. These are really answers to our prayers, and they're not in our power to endow ourselves with us. And so they are frequently taken away and changed and increased and decreased to make us realize that that these two are being received. I cannot rely on myself for the pleasures of belief, or the light of belief, or belief that the consequence of belief. Any kind of surety or safety that I feel is not in my power to create or sustain. So that really is also interesting, that if I am to think of myself as a guest, a lot of my pains and sorrows sometimes are related to thinking that, oh, I know better. How come I feel this way? I know this. I should have known this. I should have done. We have a certain tendency to form an opinion about ourselves of how we are ascending in some degrees of understanding, and we are somehow, and that's an interesting thing to think about, because it's that brings a lot of pain and sorrow as well. If I were to think that things make sense to me, or now I understand this, that I understand it, and I somehow, because of my right choice, deserve this, and it's interesting to think about how I might start to live in a worldly way, in the sense that trying to find temporary pleasure and not seeing these things as provided on the way, just to help me on the way. And the way is, has an eternal destination.
For Abraham's comment, so believer, yes, the believer is also ideally should become someone who is not having sorrows from past and not pains from future. But I guess in the case of animal, or at least this is how it looks, without being conscious of past and future, they are enjoying the moment. For men, it's not possible to not think of past and future. So with being aware of past and future, how can I be okay and actually enjoying and happy with the past and future? So I guess this is the distinction with the animal.
And I think one of the faculties, like as a human being, like that differentiates human being from like animals or other creation, obviously the ego and also the free will. So like it is not really an option for men not to like worry about for future or like have regrets from the past. Like it is part of it, the learning, part of the process. But going through that process, we are the one who always like make that decision. And actually that is the reason why man is so special, because if you come to that level that you feel no more pain like about like animals, not because like you're animals, because like you strive for it and you make the choices to like ask the make the dua for it to attain that level. I think that's what makes men more superior than the rest of the beings. If you take the like free will away and consciousness away, then like you're just another animal that is walking on 2 feet instead of 4.
So it's interesting though that maybe in here the author is inviting us to be true to ourselves, because what do we hear in the society? It's just live the moment, you only live once, make most out of your moment. But here the author is saying that the pain of the past and the fears of the future and the pain at each pleasure's passing spoil the enjoyment to be had from them. So he's kind of calling to my senses, calling me to my senses. And if this is your truth, how can you really enjoy the moment? Is it really possible? If someone says, make most out of your moment, how come? How am I going to do that? As long as I'm a human, this is not possible. And in time to time, he makes this, because in this, especially in this age, for also supporting more of consumption, we are being invited to consume more, enjoy more, if possible, the moment. Because if you would like to maximize your joy, you have to repeat the experience and ignore the consequences of the experience. Just repeat it as much as you can, which means you have to spend more, which means you have to earn more. So then you get into this cycle, which is not really possible to get out of it once you enter into it. Yet it doesn't give you pleasure. If there is no other comment, I will keep reading.
So, just, again, I agree with what you said. So, it doesn't give us pleasure without pain. It gives us it gives us pleasure that is that brings with it pain that spoils that pleasure. So yeah, we get the pleasure and we get sorrow and pain as a result of getting this pleasure. So I have the opportunity, therefore, to broaden my horizon. I have to think about what does human being prefer, to be narrow-minded about just being short-sighted, or do I as a human being want to be wise and foresighted and have a broader vision, so that I will pay attention to the sorrows and pains that those pleasures bring, and so that I will say I should try to get this pleasure in a different way, in a way that doesn't bring this kind of pain. So
Yeah, I mean, my question is, why our lives is driven by joy and happiness? Why? I feel like, for example, your comment, Abdurrahman, it's like it feels like the purpose of Islam is to give you the joy and happiness all the time, or seize the day, enjoy the moment. Is it really that simple? I mean, it's gonna come to that point, like, what is the purpose of this life again? Like this, big question. But I don't know if like seeking happiness that much, or talking about like joy and happiness all the time. The more you seek, the more they're gonna go away. I mean, that's what I experienced in my life.
Any comments for this $1 million question? Why our acts are driven by joy?
It's a good question. Whoever tries to answer this question will have to sound like someone who has solved all his problems and knows all the answers. So it is, I think it is what I would say is I should ask this question to myself: what is in life as a human being? What do I want? What do I really want? And I have to ask this question. So if I say, I want happiness, okay, maybe I will be temporarily find this understanding, okay, then I should ask, is it really the happiness that I want? And if I say no, then what is my alternative as a human being? What am I going to say that I want and why? Is it what I want makes me happy so that I want it, or do I want some things that bring me pain, for example? Do I find myself wanting that? And if I'm this kind of creature who wants or desires things that make me joyful or happy, then who made me in this way? And should I ask him what to do with this? What should I try to not make myself happy? So I have to ask Revelation, what do you want me to do with my feeling that I should want to be happy? Or, for example, if I've concluded that no, happiness doesn't work, all the happiness goes away, maybe I shouldn't be happy, then I should have to ask whoever made me, is this the right conclusion I've drawn from my experience of trying to be happy but always losing it? Is it right for me to conclude that happiness is not the right goal? Or am I looking for it in the wrong way, in the wrong place? So, this question the brother asked gives rise to lots of those questions that I have to ask and then take one option and see how it goes, and then come back and see if a different option works better. But it's important to register the question, because we may think we are all have already concluded that we all actually love the names of God, and actually it is the names of God that are making us happy, and pleasure is that belief brings, is a sign of the paradise, and all of those big things. But at our daily level, we might be asking this question that I'm always trying to find happiness and it is going away. Is it worth trying to be happy? Is it different? Or so it's a good reality check to say that we have to come back and ask, why did I decide I want this, and what is the alternative?
I think even before you ask, like, why do we always pursue happiness or pleasure? The question is, like, do I really see myself? Like, do I come to the acceptance of the fact that this is who I am? Because sometimes, like, there may be even cases that you may be lying to yourself, saying that no, that's not how man is wired. So it is something interesting. It is something with you. That's how you are wired. I don't know. But I think that's the first step. Do you see yourself wired as such? And if one can say yes, then the question is, all right, then how do I make sense of this experience of mine? How do I what are the alternatives to make sense of this reality of me, that I am constantly seeking pleasure or happiness? I think then one will start the journey to understand the reality, or the experience, or the beings, or the existence, whatever you want to call it. Then look at the options, what does the dominant culture or the worldview offers to solve that very innate desire that you have? How do they handle the problem, or how do they answer the needs?
So I'm thinking about happiness, for example, because maybe joys, because happiness changes from person to person, right? What makes you happy might make me miserable. Like I might be loving very hot, spicy food, and it might be making your life miserable when you eat hot, spicy food. So somebody might be enjoying just cutting his own flesh. Somebody else, I'm some masochistic person, maybe he's enjoying just cutting his flesh. Some other person might be enjoying eating chocolates. But I guess at the end we are looking after some enjoyment. Even we see this in a baby. When you entertain the baby, baby is happy, baby is laughing. When you ignore the baby, she starts screaming, right? So I guess in a sense we are in need of, as if I'm hardwired to have it. But the question is, now that it comes with this consequence of pain right after.
By nature, man is wired to love perfection and beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Why, I don't know, but that's your nature.
And also by your nature, by man's nature, I hate separation. I don't like it. But I am bound to both. There's no escape from it.
My immediate answer would be we are created in this way to seek the absolute perfection or the absolute perfect one. But it is just a conclusion statement. So how do you arrive at conclusion? It takes a process of investigation and questioning and reflection to arrive at that kind of conclusion.
Maybe also, yeah. Purpose, happiness. Maybe at one level also that I want things to have a purpose. Everything I do is purposeful. So I sleep at night so I can feel rested. I speak so that people understand. I listen so that I understand. I do everything purposefully. So I want everything to have a purpose that brings, you can call it happiness, that satisfaction, or that's how I am. So I look for purpose and meaning. Things should be meaningful. Everything I do is meaningful.
Mohammed Said is raising his hand.
Oh yeah. I was thinking two points about the whole conversation about on this the part that we have read tonight, and also about the questions on the questions. It may be not maybe. I think my experience of this world starts with a need. As soon as I have a need, then I attempt to satisfy that need, and I think there's no exception. It always goes like this in my personal life. So there's always a need, and that's why, let's not put it always, but when there's a need, then I attempt to find a way to satisfy that need, which means I'm seeking for happiness, because satisfaction, I think happiness in this context, I can call it happiness. So that's how it works in my world. It's a need for me to attempt to experience this world because of my need. The second thing I would like to share, it's definitely a personal insight. The author talks about the proportion, or he talks about the features or the qualities that a human being is given, we are given, and the way we use it. And then I think he kind of, let's say, claims that when we go with the pleasure of this world only, then we use that feature just for that purpose. So it suggests that a person who's aware of before attempting to experience this life, or before attempting to try to satisfy his need, this man is aware of why he needs to experience this world, or why he is going to attempt to experience this world. So he accepts it that he has a temporary need, and he has a permanent need, and accordingly he experiences the world of this life. I think when I look at myself, I don't have that concept. Maybe it's a collective mentality that I have, and it is collected in my personality. For years I'm in this world, and maybe I'm not exposed to a second approach or alternative approach to how to use my features, how to use my the qualities. So what I do is that I think I use my qualities only, or mainly, to satisfy my temporary need, and that's how it goes. So I think there's no like a certain conclusion that I can say, but this is how I feel, how it flows in my mind, this discussion so far.
Any other comments? And I'm reading the next paragraph. He gives an example for this man versus animal. So, a man gave one of his servants 10 pieces of gold and told him to have a suit of clothes made in a particular cloth. Then to a second one, he gave 1,000 pieces of gold, and putting in the servant's pocket a note on which certain things were written, sent him to a market. The first servant bought an excellent suit of the finest cloth with 10 pieces of gold, while the second servant did not use his head, and looking at the first servant and not reading the account note in his pocket, he gave 1,000 pieces of gold to a shopkeeper and asked for a suit of clothes. The dishonest shopkeeper gave him a suit of the very worst quality cloth. Then the wretched servant returned to his lord and received a severe reprimand and a terrible punishment. Thus, even the most unintelligent will understand that the 1,000 pieces of gold given the second servant were not to buy a suit of clothes, but for some important trade. In just the same way, each of the immaterial members and subtle faculties in man have expanded to a degree 100 times greater than that of the animals. For example, consider the faculties and members like man's eyes, which can discern all the degrees of beauty, and his sense of taste, which can distinguish all the varieties of the particular tastes of foods, and his mind, which can penetrate to all the subtlest points of reality, and his heart, which yearns for every sort of perfection. And then consider the extremely simple members of the animals, which have developed only 1 or 2 degrees. There is just this difference that in animals, a member particular to some function and special to a particular species develop more. But this development is particular.
So what does cloth in this example refer to? Happiness. That's how I understand. like seeking happiness is really, really like low level of existence to me. The true purpose for human being, I guess, must be the trade, not just buying a cloth, you know. So what I understand is maybe, as you said, ego to understand yourself, and maybe to understand, you know, your creator, maybe.
Or at least, let's say, because in the example, this first servant is the animal in real life. So I see an animal which is, let's say, a bird. Bird is enjoying the food that it eats. Bird is enjoying pairing with another female bird. Bird is enjoying flying and everything.
You suppose, yeah, you assume.
I mean, apparently it's not troubled.
As far as your observation goes.
So I'm not seeing birds which are very much troubled with what am I going to do tomorrow or whatever. They are at least happier than we are, apparently. So if I try to be like this bird, saying that, okay, as long as I find food, as long as I find shelter, and have a spouse, then I'm good. Because I am pretty much like a bird. If this is my mentality, then I guess I am doing like the one that he mentions in the example. So in this sense,
So like, let's compare the bird versus the man. Like, so other than the life and the bodily existence, what differs us from the animals? Because like that's what the example is talking about, right? Like 100 gold versus 10 gold, and spending on something that is worthless. So like 10 gold spent on a good quality of cloth, which they like that servant it's due, which is animal. And the one who is given 100 golds, giving 10 times more like different quality, like let's say in terms of the quantity. But then you apply it to the man and the animal. So what are the qualities that differ us from the animals, that actually we reduce those qualities down to the like lowest, like the level of animals, and misuse them? For example, like contemplation, the power of contemplation or reflection. It is a quality that animals do not have, right? As far as we can observe. You don't see a bird like sitting on the like tree, like thinking. So what is the due for that quality that man is given? Should it be just used just to secure the, like, let's say in quotation marks, secure the worldly like or bodily concerns, or it's given for some other purpose, some other reason to be used in a different way?
I guess we are generally using it for making better clothes or making much nicer houses or coming up with better recipes. Apparently, animals are not concerned with that because whatever is given to them as a cloth, they keep wearing the same cloth. And their giver of this cloth keeps renewing their cloth as well. So they're not even concerned about their cloth or the food that they get. It's the same sort of food that the birds keep eating for the last however many years. Same seeds. But with the qualities that are given to us, I guess we are using our qualities to get better of foods, better of houses, whatever. I mean, worldly joys, but I'm just giving some names for those worldly things, or getting a better car. But I guess in here, going with the example, am I being satisfied? Because the author says you are being much less satisfied than the bird with your cloth or with your house. Bird is happier than you with his small nest than you are with your house. Is this the case? I don't know, maybe this be my question.
Well, they call it correlation because there is no correlation between the two. House equals like in terms of quantity, better satisfaction, more happiness. There is no such correlations.
And I think from first-hand experience, we know that, and also we can extrapolate it. People that have more than I do, let's say, how do they behave? Are they being more content, or are they being more asking for even more? Because from my experience, I know that wanting for more out of my dissatisfaction is itself a pain. Because I'm not happy with what I have, this is why I want more, and I don't like this feeling. And although I cannot get rid of it, it's in there, it puts a lot of pressure on me, just wanting for more. Because it shows that I'm not happy with what I already have. So for the ones that are out there which have more than I do I really think that they are more satisfied than I am? Because if we take it on the scale of governments, for example, even the strongest governments are being the most aggressive governments that are trying to take over some oil or land from other governments. If being more powerful or having more wealth would be something that would be more satisfactory, then as people get richer, they should be more content and not willing to increase.
Actually, the amount of pleasure one can get from anything, let's say the most, like the biggest house or the most beautiful car, whatever you can think of, the amount of pleasure one will get out of it is limited with the person itself. So in that sense, like, no matter how large the house is, or no matter how luxurious the car is not going to make any difference if you are not able to enjoy, let's say, pasta. 2001 pasta. Which automatically should bring us to the point that if you even like, let's like think like purely like worldly, like for this, like let's approach from that perspective. If we want to increase the amount of joy and the pleasure that we want to get out of the things, we should find a way in ourselves to increase the capacity in ourselves so we can enjoy more. Does it make sense? No, you look puzzled. Did it make sense to you? Okay, can you rephrase it somehow?
So when I'm not enjoying it, the problem is not with the thing itself. The problem is with me looking for joy in that in the wrong perspective. So let's put it in a different way. Since everybody in here is Muslim and most likely have the assumption that Quran is the speech of God and the truth. Let's say you are reading a verse, since this is something that we were discussing with Abdurrahman before. Let's say you were reading a verse from chapter Nisa. And apparently it sounds very boring because it talks about those rules and regulations apparently on the surface. So text is there. I mean, you cannot increase the text. Either you're going to say that this text is wrong or just made up or whatever, or you're going to say that maybe I am wrong in some sense. I don't know how to read it. I don't know what it is talking about. So the first one is, what I understood from Usman is maybe you should check yourself. I should check myself. Maybe I am approaching the text from wrong perspective. This is why I'm not able to make sense of it. This is why it sounds boring to me. It's an option to be considered instead of right out saying that this text is wrong. And I guess the same thing applies for the things that I have in my life. Yeah, I mean, I have this body, for example. I cannot change my body. I don't have muscles that Abdurrahman has. So, but what am I going to do with this body? I mean, is it like I am doomed with that, or with whatever is given to me, how can I enjoy it more? And as I'm understanding, I should be changing my perspective on that to enjoy it.
Yeah, like, let me give you an example. Like, just imagine that you came here, which is not the case, but you came here and there's like all kind of delicious foods. Like,
I wish.
sitting on the table. And it's just so much more than you can eat, actually. what is going to determine for you to take pleasure out of that food, different type of foods, is the capacity of your stomach, how much it can hold at one time, right? That's what it limits when it comes to like pleasure in terms of taste.
Yeah.
So you can apply the same logic into like other faculties that you have. Power of reflection, for example, or the emotions, loving something, or like feeling the compassion. Like just apply it to every single one of like qualities that you can think of. Like in order to truly feel the joy, for example, there is no limit to it. If you really wants to like, let's say, like reach the nirvana of like feeling happy, it is not in the external stuff, it is within yourself, that you need to somehow figure out a way to increase that capacity so you can reach that point. Make sense?
Yeah.
For example, in the example of stomach, like maybe you will enlarge your stomach so it can hold more food. But when it comes to the human qualities, what is there? Like, what is there any way that actually you can increase that capacity?
By reading the words.
That may be one way.
Any other comments? So we still have 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. So I'm reading the next paragraph. The reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties is this. By reason of the mind and thoughts, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and extended. By reason of the mind
So
and
talk
thought.
about okay.
Hmm?
Without knowing, we already discussed about the paragraph which skipped.
This one?
Not the previous one. No, you don't have to go back to it. It just talks about the same thing that we already discussed.
The reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties is this. By reason of the mind and thoughts, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and extended. By reason of the mind and thought.
Mm.
And numerous emotions have come into being because of the multiplicity of his needs. And numerous emotions have come into being because of the multiplicity of his needs. And his senses have become extremely diverse. And because of the comprehensiveness of his nature, desires have appeared turned towards aims.
Numerous aims.
Desires have appeared turned towards numerous aims. And because he has numerous duties due to his nature, his members and faculties have expanded greatly. And because he has numerous duties due to his nature, his members and faculties have expanded greatly. And since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship, he has been given abilities which embrace the seeds of all perfection.
It's actually a deep paragraph.
Yeah. We might need Faraz here. Or
Maybe Farah is just sleeping.
or other people, online people. We haven't heard Asam, Aisha Nur. Yeah, we heard Aisha Nur, but still we can hear more. Fariha, Suhaib. Any ideas about this paragraph? We kept speaking about the easy ones. And now it's your turn.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't have like any right now ideas on this paragraph, but I've been pondering over the question that was asked early on. So sorry to backtrack a little bit. Should I be concerned about happiness or joy? And yeah, I would say yes, definitely. We should be concerned about happiness. And I recall attending or hearing a talk from someone, and he exactly said the following: human beings are built for happiness. And so that just stuck with me. Like the rest of his talk, I was just filtering in, but this part was crucial because it is in our ingredients, the way we are made. We are built for happiness. And so the question really is, how do I go on finding this happiness? Because just by observing the transience of this universe, and which the author clearly mentioned with the different analogies he provided, everything is passing, going. Things definitely cannot bring me happiness. I think it all has to do with the way, where do I put value into, or what am I attributing value towards that would determine that. And it's, I think that's a solution that we're all looking to find out. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. And I think it's really finding out how can I find happiness in a way that I'm satiated, like in my existence right now in this world. So yeah, just wanted to share that part.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Any other comments about this paragraph? I am rereading it with the hope that, Fareha, are you going to say something? Okay. So for the reason for men's, yeah, go ahead. Okay. But the reason for men's wealth in regard to faculties is this: by reason of the mind and thought, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and expanded. So it is apparently the same senses and feelings, more or less, but they are expanded with thought and mind. Is this what this sentence is saying?
Same as the animals?
Yeah, I mean, more or less, let's say there's this eyesight in there in the animals as well. A human has a deepened sense of eyesight because of thought and mind. Is this what he's saying?
I mean, like, if you like think about it, like in terms of like bodily existence, they are very similar: power of sight, power of hearing, taste. But like, just take the taste, for example, like for animals, for cows, all they eat is just grass. It's pretty much just one, maybe a couple different type of grass. But when it comes to like man, on one side, like it is, in terms of the like bodily existence, it is pretty similar. When it comes to differentiating like endless different type of taste, it is something completely different than the animals.
So is it like?
And you can apply the same thing, for example, like in terms of beauty and perfection and perceiving that, like we can, like, there is no limit for man's like power of sight to discern the different level of perfections.
So, I guess Faraz was also talking about that. So once I am given the intellect, as if I am compelled to make sense of things, I am seeking for something more than just the taste itself. In the thing, within the things that I taste, I am also seeking for something more. As if intellect and mind gives me a depth. Otherwise, if I didn't have this, I would be living in a, let's say, two-dimensional world, just enjoy the taste. But now that I am given this third dimension, I am not being satisfied with just a two-dimensional plane-like figure. I am also looking for a depth to anything in existence. So in a sense, I would like to make sense of every taste. I would like to make sense of every sight. Because let's say I have a three-dimensional eyesight. And if I were only seeing two-dimensional objects in my environment, just I can put yourself like that in such a world. You have an eye which can see 3 dimensions, but all the objects around you are two-dimensional. What would you do? You need to look at them from a certain angle in order to see them. Otherwise, they are becoming invisible after some point. It would be annoying for a person who has a 3-dimensional eyesight.
Has the potential but cannot practice.
Yes, yes. So in here, apparently the author sees human intellect as the source of, if you like, problem, or maybe the cure. Because of this dimension that human's qualities are becoming extended and developed. This is one aspect.
Should we say like human intellect, reasoning, or mind, or consciousness, the awareness, like whatever, like through the intellect, we have the consciousness of the needs, or different level of desires or wants or needs. If you didn't have the consciousness, you wouldn't know any of those. Even though, like, let's say, like, tongue may have the capability of tasting, like, numerous different, like, tastes. But if man doesn't have the consciousness to differentiate that, like, then it doesn't exist for you. So that is the function of, like, intellect for man to have the awareness of consciousness of the existence. And that existence, like, through the other faculties, the consciousness, that consciousness brings you to the awareness that your wants and needs are innumerable, but you are completely impotent. That's how it started, actually, understanding his impotence.
I wanted to ask something regarding that. So I think Brother Usman was talking about just now about how because of that consciousness, right, I become aware of all my needs. And I think we're almost out of time, but maybe we can discuss this next week. In the paragraph, it talks right after establishing, the comprehensive of one's nature, of the numerous duties that one has because of their nature. And duties just seems like a strange way to put it for me, at least. But I was thinking, at least through the discussion that has been going on so far, is it, I become conscious of these needs that I have, and is the author trying to say that because of this consciousness of these needs, I have a duty to fulfill them or to satisfy them? I mean, surely, yes, I would want to. I have the desire to satisfy them. But how? I mean, duty just sounds like a sense of responsibility that one owes to one's own self. So I don't know. I was just wondering what others have extracted from the idea that one has numerous duties due to one's nature. Again, I know we're low on time, but just wanted to throw that out into the ballpark. Thanks.
Duties due to his nature, his members and faculties has expanded greatly. It's not like, in a way, duties to yourself, because, like, if you have the need and if you have the, like, consciousness of the need, then, like, next natural thing to do is just seek for an answer for it, or, like, fulfillment for it, and that becomes a duty for you. Isn't that what he's talking about?
So what I feel, again, the main topic here is about the senses and feelings. What is the reason that we have them, right? So in the comparison he's making is with the animals and how they're what minimal kind of senses and feeling qualities that they have. Right, so that's what the previous examples were talking about in terms of the 10 pieces of whatever gold versus thousands of pieces of gold that man has been given. And again, it takes to the point, why do we have those? And again, as the discussion was going on, we spoke about the temporariness and the temporal pleasures that we get. And then if we use our senses ourselves and we question that, is this what I am given the taste of sense, the sense of taste for, or the smell, or my the desire I have, or the love I have, just for this particular temporal pleasure? Is that what it is for? And then in this paragraph that was just read, the reason for man, the author's trying to explain, why am I given these faculties? And I think he's nailing down on exactly what the purpose of those, what the purpose of these senses and feelings is for. So they are not just to be wasted, but they have important functionality, which is what the duties is, how I understand that they have a particular function. And as Osman was saying about how, in terms of the ego, we have to use that. So that is also, I consider that also one of the tools, or one of man's qualities, along with the senses and feelings, that they all have a particular purpose. And that's what that purpose is to be used. It becomes a duty for us to acknowledge and recognize that who we are as human beings, just like we have the needs, we are also given all these senses, tools, and qualities, and they are given for a particular purpose. And to apply that particular purpose is our duty.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.